Hi, I'm Bob Whiten. I'm the product manager for Hilco, and I'll be your instructor for this series. Now, with soldering optical frames, there are a few different options you have for equipment. There are carbon or electric units. There's also two tank systems for gas, as well as a system that I'm going to be showing today, which is a compact system that runs on butane. Just briefly, the carbon units were the original units that people used to repair optical frames with, and they're a little outdated, they're a little dirty and bulky, and they're very, very difficult to get used to, especially learning from the start. It's very difficult to get used to that piece of equipment. I believe that gas is the way to go. It's a much cleaner flame for optical frames, especially because most frames are going to will have some sort of coating on it, whether it's a clear coat or paints. So I definitely recommend the gas unit. And the gas unit I'm going to show you today is called the Blazer Torch, and it runs on just standard butane fuel. And how you fill this tank up, you remove it from the stand, and there's a hole in the bottom of it, and you simply take the butane gas and fill up the chamber. It takes about 5-7 seconds, and you can feel the chamber get really cold. That's how you know you're getting butane in there. We'll put the torch back in its stand. Okay. To turn on the gas, this knob in front of it that says open, you turn that on, turn it towards the open, and you can hear the gas escaping from the torch. Now it has an automatic igniter. You press that and you'll get a flame. Now for anybody who's soldered before, they can look at this flame and say that is not optimum for soldering, and you adjust that flame for soldering by this middle knob, which controls the amount of oxygen that flows through, so you can get a nice pinpoint flame. And that's exactly what we're looking for in soldering. Now when we solder, you'll notice that the flame does come out to about here, but the hottest part of this flame is at the very tip of an inner blue flame. And that's exactly where we're going to bring it to the frames to get the solder to adhere to the frame. To turn off the torch, you just turn it in the opposite direction to open, and it shuts down. And that's the Blazer Torch that we're going to be using today. There are different solders available to solder optical frames as well. And here what I'm showing are 3 different types of solders that are available. Here we have a large gold chip piece, which typically would be cut down into smaller squares, and it would be mixed with a flux such as this white paste soldering flux in order to adhere to the frame. There's also solders that have flux mixed in with them, such as this, we call this mud paste or mud solder. And it's silver shavings mixed in with flux, and you can also solder with this type for optical use. There's also rod form, which happens to be our favorite in our repair center here at Hilco. Every one of our repair technicians uses this solder for a couple of different reasons. This stick is hollow in the middle, and there is flux in the center of it, so there's no need for mixing the flux, which is an added step in soldering. It also melts at a lower temperature than either one of these two solders or any other solder in the market. The temperature it melts at is 1070 degrees, which is critical in soldering optical frames because they do have a finish on them, and the lower the solder temperature melting point is, the quicker you're going to be able to solder and the less discoloration you're going to get. So you're going to have less cleanup afterwards. And it also has as much strength as any one of these other solders, and it works great for the optical application. Now the first solder job that we're going to perform is pretty basic. It's going to be soldering a guard arm or a pad arm onto a frame front. Now here I have the frame that has the left side guard arm broken off, and here I have the piece of the guard arm. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the screw in the pad and prep it for soldering. So I can remove that screw. Now you'll notice on the opposite side I've already taken that pad arm off. I don't want to discolor The pad arms, I'll probably use those again. If they were old and worn, I'd probably replace them, but these were in good shape, so I removed them, and there's no risk of burning them while I'm soldering. Now the next step is you need some sort of holding device. And I really like a self-clamping device, such as these hemostats, so that I can lock the piece that I'm soldering in place and then get it ready for soldering. Now the first step in soldering is to get some solder on the piece that you're gonna repair. So I'm going to turn on our microtorch and get the flame I need by adjusting the oxygen intake. Okay. I have my piece of polarium solder here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ball up a little solder at the very tip of that rod. Okay. That looks like it's going to be just enough for our application here. And on the very end of the pad arm, and this is typically where people have problems in soldering. They can't get the solder to adhere to the metal. And usually the reason is they're concentrating the heat on the solder where you should concentrate it on the metal. Or they've got the torch way back here and they're not getting enough heat. Remember, the hottest part of the flame is inside that inner blue flame. Bring it right in on the piece, get that heated, and you can bring your solder in and get it to flow. You really want to heat the metal, and the solder will be attracted to the heat. So don't be afraid of heat in the frame. So now I'm going to position the piece to solder. So I'm heating mainly the eye wire, and I'm trying to get the solder to jump from the guard arm to the eye wire, and there it flows. Once it turns to a liquid and your job is set up correctly, if you're not trying to reposition it, you can stop with the heat, take it away, and let it set up. Just takes a couple seconds. And we have what we think is a finished solder job, but what's very important, first we're going to cool it. What's very important is once you've soldered, before you go through any other steps, you want to take a plier and test that solder joint. Give it a couple of twists, and yes, that's adhered very well. So now that it's cool, we have a little bit of excess solder over here on the eye wire. You can take a file, just file it away a little bit, smooth it out. I always check the inside of the eye wire to make sure no solder has flowed inside that channel, because that could damage a lens when you insert it if you fill in any portion of that groove. If it does fill in, you can take a cutting disc and simply cut it away and create that V groove again. We have no solder in there. So the next step is to polish the discoloration. Seems like we got a little lucky with this frame. It didn't blacken all that much. It happens to be just a gold-plated frame. So I'm taking my polishing wheel, dressed with some compound, and just lightly buff that soldered area. The compound will also smooth out the solder, just as filing did. It's also removing any of the discoloration that occurs. Okay. But now what we've done is we've soldered the frame, and we've buffed it out, and we've removed some of the gold plating that's on the eye wire and the guard arm. Now it's up to each practice. Some solderers stop here, or some soldering practices stop here, and they explain to their customers that they don't have any touch-up techniques. But there are some simple things that you can do, and equipment that you can invest in to touch up the colors on the frame. And to replenish the gold plate on this frame, the first step that is necessary is to make sure that the area is very clean. The polishing compound we use is a wax base, so some wax can get on the eye wire, or any time that we touch it we're getting oils on there. So we want to remove all the debris and place it into an ultrasonic cleaner. Let it run a cycle of about 1 minute, which is fine. It'll remove all the debris, clean that area. Now the ultrasonic has run its cycle. Wipe down the frame. We have a nice clean area. And I'm going to use a plating machine to touch up plate where we soldered. This plating system has different colored pens in it: gold, palladium, copper, nickel, black nickel, to replenish just the plating that is put on the frame at the manufacturing level. But the first step that we're going to take is we're going to use the degreasing pen, and this will clean the frame just that little bit further so that we get a nice gloss finish on the gold plating. What we do is we take the pen and just clip on the red clip here onto the pen. Each pen has a color code, and you set the machine to that particular color. The degreaser is green. Remove the cap, and these are disposable pens. They're not refillable, so once they're used up, you purchase another pen. Place the alligator clip on the Eyewear, and just brush the pen back and forth, the degreaser pen. Clean that area front and back. Doesn't take very long, but it really enhances the shine of the plating by using the degreaser. Now I'm going to use a 24 karat gold color pen. Slide the pen on. The 24 karat has a blue stripe. Turn it over to blue. Take our alligator clip, make contact on the frame, and then just brush it on lightly. Now, in using this pen plating system, the longer you brush, the darker or deeper the color gets. So if it has a very brassy look to it, which this frame really doesn't have, you can just keep wiping it on and you'll get a deeper brass type of finish. And I'll just brush it on for an example. You can see how much deeper it gets when you compare it to what's on the rest of the frame. It gets very deep. And it's great for repairs. It's not recommended to use a machine like this to plate an entire frame, but it certainly works well in the repair area. And there you have it. As good as new. The next frame we're going to solder has a broken bridge, which is another common repair. And I have the frame here in our helping hands. And I'm just holding it a little bit differently this time in the frame holder, the helping hands, which is kind of an important point. If I were to take this alligator clip and move it over, and I'm trying to fix that broken bridge, try to get it together, this clip is kind of in my way. Actually, what I do is I visibly split the frame in half and grab one side of it. So now that I can finagle that Eyewear to position it correctly when I solder. So I'm going to use the polarium solder and the blazer torch once again. Get the flame of the torch exactly where we want it to be. And this time I'm going to put the solder, I'm just going to start putting the solder onto the bridge. And just as I did with the guard arm, I'm just going to ball up a little solder on the polarium rod. And now I'm going to focus my heat once again on the metal, on the bridge portion, and get that solder to jump to the bridge. Here we go. Once it jumps from the rod, that ball of solder jumps from the rod onto the bridge, you can stop. Now, I'm going to squeeze the bridge together as well as bring heat to the opposite side of the Eyewear and draw the solder from the bridge to the Eyewear, and that will create my bond. Once it flows to a liquid, take the heat away. There's no more need for the heat. You want to take it away as soon as possible so you don't discolor the frame. Just let it set for 2 seconds or so. And now we have a soldered joint